going on, guys? Welcome back to the Daily Dish. I'm your host, Christian Royston, joined by my co-host, Logan Shane. We are just getting back from the T-Mobile Center, where Iowa State is your 2024 Big 12 champs. So, kind of an exciting game. Definitely not what I expected going into this. I thought Houston was going to really give them some problems. I think we even talked about that a lot. Yet, Iowa State just rolled through them.
Yeah, and it's crazy to see that because really, I think it was Milan that kind of put it in perspective after the game. This was 3 rematches that Iowa State had really against Kansas State, Baylor, and Houston. Sorry to not focus right away on the championship game, but just to kind of put it in perspective. And he's like, I forget the wording that he used. He's like, we crushed them, or we rolled, and what you said, they rolled through them. I mean, Houston put up a really good fight in that first probably like 10 minutes. It was shot for shot. You know, both teams kind of going back and forth. You didn't really know where it was going to go. But overall, after that, Iowa State went into halftime with a 7-point lead, and then it was the second half that they really ran away with it. But I'm right there with you. I was really surprised at just how Iowa State came out, not only defensively but offensively, just keeping their game rolling from Baylor.
Yeah, I mean, we knew that they were going to put up a fight defensively. I mean, holding Houston to less than 25 points in the first is like really as good as you can do. I mean, they also put up 30 against them, which, I mean, you go into that half with 7 points, and I think at that point we were kind of like, well, still not sure if they're going to pull this out. But then the first 2 minutes they went on a 7-0 run, which saw Keyshawn knock down that just the most bizarre 3. It almost seemed like a heat check 3. It went in, and I was like, okay, well, I mean, that's got to be game.
Right.
By 14. And honestly, they never really dipped under 14 throughout the rest of the game.
Yeah, and they really just went on in that second half and dominated. I want to pull up their stats here for the second half. They finished 13 for 24 from the floor in the second half, 4 for 11 from 3, although they didn't really need to count on the threes in the second half because they were just finding each other. I mean, Trey King said after the game, not even just the fluidity that which they played with, but they had, I want to see right here, let's see. While I try and find that, they only turned the ball over 4 times. Houston turned it over 8 times. And again, this is another game that we saw from Iowa State where they didn't really have to rely on forcing turnovers to create their offense. They were doing it themselves, which really was another surprising factor to me, that they just keep this offense that they've had going into the tournament going.
Yeah, you talk about the turnovers. I think going into this, you have probably 2 of the top teams in the nation when it comes to turnover margin. I think I told you beforehand, I was like, well, it's probably going to be even on turnovers. And I think it ended one of the teams had 1 more turnover than the other.
Yeah.
I mean, it was one of those games where both defenses kind of knew how good they were, knew the offenses, knew how to exploit them. So they really didn't make any careless mistakes, I want to say.
Right, and I think this is 2 teams that really just respect each other's defense. So kind of like what you were alluding to, you knew that was kind of going to cancel out at some point. But overall, it was just Iowa State taking advantage of the shots that they were given. They were making highlight plays. I mean, Milan doing a 360 corner 3, slam dunks from Hassan Ward. I mean, they were just doing whatever they really wanted to against Houston, which is just surprising because Houston often throughout this whole season has made every team that they've played, play their worst game on offense. We saw that against Iowa State multiple times, even in their win in Ames. But it was just a crazy game. I'm still not even really over watching it.
Yeah, I mean, it was Houston's biggest loss of the season, which, I mean, if you really want to nitpick, I think going into that half, they come out of it, Iowa State goes on that run. I think at that point, Houston was like, okay, given the atmosphere, given it's pretty much Hilton South, every single highlight play that you mentioned, T-Mobile Center just was so loud, rivaled Hilton. And then you're at that point in the game, probably 18 minutes left. I want to say that I think Sampson was kind of sitting there like, well, we could try to grind back this 14-point lead. We've barely been able to put up 23 points against this team. Or we can kind of coast through. They don't really care about the Big 12 championship because they're already nearly locked into a 1 seed.
Mhm.
Worst case scenario, everybody loses, they go to a 2 seed. So they're worried about the NCAA tournament.
Mhm.
And that's what I was kind of told afterwards by some of the other reporters. And that's kind of what it seemed like is Houston kind of rolled over early in that second half, and Iowa State just blew by them. But,
Yeah.
I mean, that kind of starts from the first half too.
Right. And you're going to see this to kind of get to the tournament a little bit. You're going to see this from both Iowa State and Houston is that they know that their defense is going to outlast any other conference that they go up against, whether it's an SEC, a mid-major, whatever the case may be. Their offense is definitely going to carry them. And we know that Houston is a lot better than how they played today, even offensively, because defensively they still, were pretty good in that first half. But it's just kind of like what you said. I mean, Houston knew that they were going to lose this game. I mean, for them, a conference title doesn't really mean much to them. But for Iowa State, for this to be TJ Otzberger's first in his tenure, I mean, it means a whole lot to them. And it's not even just to say that, this was a game that Houston punted away, because Iowa State could have very easily walked into this game knowing that they were going to lose and just kind of take an L going into the NCAA tournament. But they really wanted to win this, and you can't fault them for that.
Yeah, and I think it really came down to defense, and Iowa State's defense just played better than Houston, which, I mean, you have two of the top defenses in the nation going against each other. One of them is going to have to come out on top.
Mm-hmm.
And, I mean, I talked about Iowa State holding Houston to 23 points in the first half. I think it was like 5 minutes into the second half. Houston still hadn't put a point on the board, which is kind of what we saw Houston's defense do to other teams in the Big 12 tournament.
Right.
And then I want to say it was like 10 minutes into the second half, Houston still hadn't even scored 10 points.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, from that, I mean, they scored less than 20 in the second half.
Mm-hmm.
41 points in the Big 12 tournament is something that you kind of have to be excited about as an Iowa State fan, because that shows that they can keep one of the top offenses, their top 25 at least, to 40 points.
Mm-hmm.
And although maybe Houston could have bumped that up a little bit if they tried even harder in the second, but they were still able to keep them under 30 points for probably 30 minutes. So, I mean, that's got to be promising for TJ.
Yeah, and as much as we're going to talk about the offense in these next couple days, this next week before the tournament starts, we really do have to just kind of credit Iowa State's defense that, really outdid Houston's defense, which, like I said earlier, they have been praised for all season long. We knew that this was going to be a defensive battle, but for Iowa State to come in here and really send the message, even if you want to say that Houston knew that they were going to lose this game and kind of turn the effort down towards the end of the second half, I mean, it's still Iowa State saying, like, we're here, we're a team that, should be feared going into March. And, I'm excited for them going into this, but especially for us going down the floor, seeing the emotions of all the players, like, you could definitely tell that, like, this means so much more to them than we'll ever understand.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of experienced a little bit of that last year with the women's tournament when I saw them win it all, and then this year, I want to shout out Keyshawn because he was the most outstanding player for the whole tournament, because I think he averaged probably close to 18 points a game.
Mm-hmm.
And him getting that belt, and TJ, I mean, he's had a good relationship with TJ for years. I mean, seeing him smile, seeing them embrace, I mean, it's so much more than just another win or a Big 12 title. Being able to bring it home in Kansas City in front of, I mean, probably 95% Iowa State fans. It was almost like written in the stars that it had to be Iowa State.
Yeah, and Keyshawn had a great game. Again, one of those guys where I wouldn't say he was at all. I would not say that he was the main reason that Iowa State wasn't doing well offensively towards the end of the regular season, but you could definitely tell that, and he admitted to it afterwards. It's like they knew their offense needed to change going into it. Specifically, I guess I would kind of group him with Milan as guys who, they can hit big-time shots and make big plays, and they really were at the forefront in these last 2-3 games. Both of them and Lipsy make the all-tournament team, and they more than deserve it, because we had doubts even going into the Kansas State game. because we didn't know how the offense was going to look. And that's something that I really want to shout out is that they did a really good job of kind of regrouping and finding an offense, like finding themselves and the roles that they each have that worked for them to get to where they did at the end of tonight.
And it really came as no surprise that Lipsy made the all-tournament team. I mean, I could have seen that from a mile away, but Milan, his last two games, he shot 50% from three again tonight.
Mm-hmm.
His last two games really were the driving factor from three-point shooting. I mean, from that sense, he led the team in scoring, knocked down 4 of his 8 shots. And I mean, that's, when you look at Iowa State, like their last 2 wins, it really was three-point shooting.
Mm-hmm.
They were able to just separate completely from their opponents because they were able to hit from beyond the arc. And Milan was such a driving force in that, and that's just something that we kind of didn't see going into the tournament because there had been that shooting slump.
Mm-hmm.
So seeing him get back his confidence, I mean, that another promising sign going forward.
And that's huge, not only as a freshman, but as one of the primary, just best true shooters on the team for Iowa State. Yeah, he drops 18 points tonight. He goes 4 for 8 from 3. Had some really big threes. I mean, some big momentum threes. Also 6 rebounds, which kind of stands out to me. He's just he really stepped up as a freshman in this tournament. So, I mean, he had a great last 3 games. He totally deserves that all-tournament nod. And overall, I mean, we also were talking about it before we got on here. Hassan Ward really stepped up as well, both offensively and defensively. He is kind of like the silent hero in this for someone that was always, I've kind of criticized a little bit for, not only being, someone that really we've only seen have offensive success with dunks, but defensively, he's kind of off and on. But these last 2 games, he really stepped it up in, the rebounding, the blocking, and just overall defensive, echelon in general.
Yeah, and although he didn't have a rebound this game because Trey King, who at one point I remember looking at you and saying, okay, Trey King has 0 points
Mm-hmm.
and 8 rebounds, but I mean Hassan Ward's ability to just show his versatility in scoring, just because I think throughout the season we were like, okay, sure, he has exciting plays. He can dunk the ball, he can catch lobs, he can lay up pretty easily, but he really doesn't have like a floater or mid-range shots.
Mm-hmm.
He kind of relies on being under the basket, and he really showed off that that's not the case in this tournament. And I mean, sure, he didn't have rebounds, but he also hits most of his free throws tonight.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, having somebody like that who is extremely athletic can just be disruptive on the defensive end. He can also, really turn the tides at times with his offensive capability, and it's good to see him also hitting a stride. I mean, I just think that all the offensive pieces really just are starting to click at the perfect time.
Yeah, and although I had a blunder there with Hassan Ward not having a rebound, just like he had 6 the day prior, so kind of makes it up for myself a little bit there. But a big category in this game where Iowa State, it was really an emphasis for me that I wanted to see how they would play against them, because in their other matchups they had not won the rebound battle. They had not really done very well against Houston, which you can't really fault them for that, because Iowa State or Houston is, I think they ended as the best rebounding team in the conference, but Iowa State ended with, 1 more rebound than them. And while that's not really, that much better, obviously, they still hung around with them. And, it just showed that they had a fight for the rebounds on the defensive end. And that is really what kind of turned the tide for them offensively, just kept setting up shots for them constantly. So honestly, I mean, it just really feels like a complete game. I can't really, point out any factor where Iowa State didn't really do well at.
Yeah, I mean, usually we see Iowa State have lulls at times, and sure, there might have been some, but I mean, you really can't ask for a better game. I mean, they shot 50% from the field, 41 from 3. I mean, you look at this team, with their defensive capability, they've always had great defense. I mean, they're keeping most of these teams under 60 points. Mm-hmm. If they're able to hit some of their shots, I mean, they hit a good amount of their shots. and they're putting up 70 points a game. I mean, if you can keep your opponent under 60 and you score over 70, you should be able to roll through people. Right. I mean, that's especially true going forward when they're going to be playing teams that aren't in the Big 12 that haven't experienced this defense up close and personal, and especially with some of these other conferences that focus more on like offensive outputs. I think if Iowa State can keep up on the offensive end, but also give issues on the defensive end, like I could see a deep run for this team.
Yeah, and we'll see them tomorrow for Selection Sunday, see where they end up at. With how many top teams have lost today, including Houston, Iowa State might sneak in there as a 1 seed. I would probably lean towards more of them just, staying in at the 2 seed. And I kind of like that you bring up their defense and how other conferences are going to adjust to that, just because, I mean, I feel like that's just what's going to drive them through the first 2 rounds of the tournament, because, they're going to go up against teams that are used to scoring maybe, 80, 90 points a game, but Iowa State will hold you to what we just saw from Houston, under 50 points a game, under 45 points a game in this matchup. So it's definitely going to be interesting moving forward to see, but tonight I think just seeing the emotions from the players, I think it's going to be awesome to just these next, 3-4 days, whatever the case is, just to let that all marinate for them.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's definitely something that I think they obviously know the importance of it.
Mm-hmm.
They're not just going to put this in the rear view right away. I mean, yes, they have more to go for, and they have their job's not done. But I mean, there's still a good gap until the NCAA tournament, and they'll see their efforts paid off on Selection Sunday, which, I mean, we can talk about that. I mean, Houston, Purdue, North Carolina lost. I mean, Arizona lost. You have all these like top teams. A lot of the top 8, top 10 teams dropped their conference tournament games. A lot of them in the semifinals even. So it's like, these are like not great losses, and they could affect the seeding in a way where Iowa State gets that 1 seed. But even if they don't, I still think that they're a lock for Omaha at this point, just because being a top 2 seed, I feel like they would get the preferable spot, and Omaha would be a great place for Iowa State to play, because we saw the fans travel to Kansas City. They're going to travel to Omaha, no problem.
Yeah, and for them to go to Omaha, that would obviously be great for the fans, but I think they are just kind of locked in on that. They've been locked in on the NCAA tournament for a while, what I think. And I think also that maybe they kind of got the best of that. Not only, I think we were talking about it a little bit going after the Kansas State game, like, I think they were locked, or they were just kind of ready to get to the Big 12 tournament. Well, now that that's over, now we kind of have to think, well, maybe after the Kansas State game, they kind of were just wanting to prove themselves in this Big 12 tournament so that they can now focus on, obviously, the NCAA tournament. And I think they'll probably still get that 2 seed. They'll probably be the highest 2 seed there. But for them, if there's anything that I could predict that would come out from TJ, it'd just be whoever they play is who they play. They're going to play the same way. But you got to think that these last 3 games, they have impressed the people that go out and seed these tournaments. So we will definitely see less than 24 hours from today, less than probably 12 hours. I'm not really sure when that'll all go down, but I mean, it's an exciting time to be watching college basketball.
Oh yeah. And I mean, especially because March is finally here. Like this is the time of the year that we've been waiting for. So, I mean, all we can really do is just wait and see. Just wait for Selection Sunday to go, and then we got the big dance ahead of us. So we will have more for you guys when we know more. And thank you guys for watching all of our coverage at the Big 12 tournament. It's been really fun down here, especially with Iowa State winning. Can't really complain. So thank you guys for watching, and we will be back again with another episode of The Daily Dish.